Evening everyone, and welcome to a very special Insta Live. I'm Alex, one of the co-founders of Field Doctor, and tonight I'm going to be joined by dietitian Laura Tilt, and her and I are going to be joined by Felice Jacka and Tatiana Rocks, all the way from Deakin University's Food and Mood Centre, to talk about the role of diet in supporting better mental health, who've been advising us on the development of our new food and mood plan. Food for better mental health is an area that has really inspired me, particularly in the creation of Field Doctor. So super excited to be speaking to Felice and Tatiana tonight, because in the world of nutritional psychiatry, these two pretty much are the best of the best. So, first hurdle, can I get 4 people on an Insta Live? Let me have a go. Here we go. Right, let's see if we can get Laura on first. Here we go. We're going to invite Tatiana. This is where it'd be good if I could spell. Is that one? And I'm going to try and then Felice. There we go. Right, just better. I'm just going to triple check that I've got Tatiana's address right. That's what I think so. See how we get on. Is anyone joining? Just invited everyone. Try again. Laura, will you join us? It says you're unable to join. This is going to go brilliantly. Try again. Just inviting Felice. It says, sorry, I can't. Can you request again? This is going brilliantly. What I might do, false start. Oh no, here we go. Hey, Felice, how are you?
Good, Alex. How are you?
This is the first challenge, is can I get people to actually join? We've got one.
I find Instagram Live quite tricky to negotiate. So, but anyway, I'm here, and I know Tatiana is about to join as well.
Perfect. Let's see where Laura is. How are you doing? Super early in Australia.
It is, and everyone here is probably a bit sleepless and grumpy this morning because it's been really hot overnight.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, so nobody's sleeping very well because it's just too warm to sleep properly. But I mean, I know that you all had that last summer because I was there in London last summer and I was amazed at how hot it was.
I'm trying to get Tatiana, and she's given me the Food and Mood Academy handle, and I can't find it. I can find the Food and Mood Centre, but when I type in Food and Mood Academy, there is...
It's definitely there.
Food? Is it definitely Food and Mood Academy? Why doesn't my site like to find it? This is a great start.
I mean, you and I can start in the interim, but yeah, it's unless you join her as an individual.
Yeah, it's funny. I can find it on my laptop, but I can't find it on my phone. And
if you look at my stories, there'll be the direct link to it in my stories. I always put the direct link to the academy. There was a post I did about our new course that was starting.
Yeah. I might send her an email. I wonder if she can ask to join. Here's Laura.
Hello.
Hey, Laura.
3 out of 4. That's pretty good, Alex.
Oh, so Food and Mood Academy just joined. So
brilliant. Maybe Tatiana, as you've joined, can you request to join, and I will invite you in. I can see she's joined there. Let's see if I can add her as a moderator. Well, let's start. And Tetiana, as you are watching, if you can request to join, then we can bring you in. So I've done a mini blurb, and now we're 5 minutes into the. But yeah, I'm super excited to be talking to you and Tetiana when she joins tonight. I'll give a mini intro, and tell me if I get anything wrong, Felice. But you're Professor of Nutritional Psychiatry and Director of the Food and Mood Centre at Deakin University.
Mm-hmm.
Founder and President of the International Society for Nutritional Psychiatry.
No longer the President, immediate past President of the ISNPR. So Dr. Wolf Marx is now President, but I am the founder.
And certainly, in my opinion, the world-leading pioneer of nutritional psychiatry. So super excited to be talking to you. And Dr. Tetiana Rocks, when we can get her on, is Senior Research Fellow and Director of the Food and Mood Academy at Deakin University, extensively involved in the educational and training of professionals and the community, particularly on the topic of nutritional psychiatry. And I think we met sort of 2 years ago in London, and yeah, certainly it's been something that I've wanted to work more closely with you guys. And 2 years on, we've got there, and really excited to be talking to you this evening. So
it's great to be here.
Maybe I wonder if we could just kick off and just, I guess, just talk about what food and mood. Obviously it's a very interesting topic, and maybe you can tell us a bit more about your work.
So nutritional psychiatry is really focuses on how what we eat, our daily diets and our nutritional status, how that influences our mental and brain health. So when people think about food and they think about mental health, they're often thinking about eating disorders. So how mental health affects eating behaviours. Nutritional psychiatry looks at the other way. That's not to say that we don't consider eating disorders, but it's much more about what our daily habits in relation to diet are, what sort of influence they're having on our mental and brain health. And so what we've seen in the field is a very extensive body of evidence now from right across the world and from the very start of life, so including what mum eats during pregnancy, children's diets, right through to old age. And, you know, as we get older, often people develop mental disorders for the first time, that there's a very clear link between the quality of our diets and our risk for developing these common mental disorders, which is depression and anxiety. And they really account for a very large burden of illness around the globe. Now, really importantly, these links are not explained by income, education, body weight. And that's a big one. People often think, oh, it must be to do with the size of my body. And it's not. You know, we take that into account. It doesn't have any bearing on the association from the data that we see. And when it comes to the clinical trials where we've, you know, we led the SMILES trial, which was the first one, but there's been several since then, showing that if you have people, even with quite severe major depressive disorder, and you support them to make those improvements to their diet, improving the intake of more plant foods, different types of vegetables, whole grains, fish, olive oil, these sorts of things, that, and very importantly, reducing ultra-processed foods and unhealthful foods, that it has a profound impact and a really huge benefit to their mental health without changing their body weight at all. So this is not about body weight, and it's not about people eating differently because of their mental disorder. Now, that does happen a little bit, but it's not to the great degree that people imagine. And one of the reasons for that is it's not just people with a mental disorder or not just people of, you know, limited socioeconomic status who are eating badly. Everybody is eating badly. If you look at the national nutrition surveys, I mean, everyone's eating appallingly. In the UK and the US, about 60% of people's average intake is coming from these ultra-processed foods. And we've got a very important umbrella review coming out next week in the BMJ about this. In Australia, it's not quite so bad, but it's getting higher. These ultra-processed foods and unhealthful foods are ubiquitous. They're everywhere. You can't fill up your car with petrol. You can't go anywhere without being bombarded with opportunities to consume these foods. They interact with the reward systems of the brain. They're highly palatable. The emerging evidence is that they have a differential impact on the body and maybe satiety mechanisms. So people are more hungry or they eat more when they're consuming these foods. They're heavily marketed, they're cheap, they're very difficult to avoid. So this is really a food systems issue. It's a policy issue. It's an environmental issue. It shouldn't be up to individuals to have to fight against this the whole time. But we really need to do everything we can to support people to have a healthier diet, and particularly when we put our prevention hats on, because half of all mental disorders start before the age of 14. And so many of the factors that affect our risk for a mental disorder, things like early life trauma and genetics and poverty and disadvantage, these are not things that are easily modified by individuals. Whereas, what you eat, arguably, is something that people have some choice over. And the final thing I'd say is that people will often assume that eating a healthier diet is more expensive, and that can be true. But what we showed with our SMILES trial is that the diet we were advocating for was actually less expensive than the unhealthy diet people were eating at the start, because we really focus on that, legumes and, even things like frozen vegetables and dried beans. And, I live on legumes and the pressure cooker, so it does not have to be expensive. But yes, this is the field of nutritional psychiatry, how diet influences our mental and brain health, and how we can change it to both prevent and treat mental disorders.
Yeah. And maybe we can discuss a bit the role of diet in the prevention of mental health disorders.
So as I mentioned, we see that right from the start of life, diet seems to play a role. So we've led very large studies with tens of thousands of parents and children, and there are now meta-analyses indeed showing that what mum eats during pregnancy is related to not only the mental and behavioural health outcomes of children, but also things like ADHD and neurocognitive outcomes. And the increasing evidence is that what mum is consuming during pregnancy, and probably what they consume before pregnancy, one of the pathways in which this can have a bearing on children's brain development is through the microbiome. So the gut microbiome of mums is producing thousands of different molecules during the baby's development. This is influencing all aspects of their physiology, most likely, and I should emphasise here that at this point, most of what we know is coming from animal studies. But then also the mother's microbiome influences the infant's microbiome when they're born, and the increasing evidence is that the infant's microbiome not only plays a very important role in immune development, but also plays a role in brain development. So when we think about prevention, we go right back to the start of life, and we see that what children or human bodies are exposed to right from the beginning seems to influence their mental and brain health outcomes. And here I'm talking primarily the data I've looked at things like emotional health, like things that relate to depression and anxiety, but also ADHD. We published a very important study a couple of years ago from Norwegian data showing that mothers' diets and children's diets were related to ADHD diagnoses and symptoms. But then in adolescence, where, we, as I said, we have a very much higher risk of developing mental disorders, particularly for young women coming into puberty. That seems to be a particularly high period of risk. We have many studies now that show that independent of family socioeconomic status or family conflicts or family environment, the quality of their diet is very clearly linked to their mental health. Now, we know that there's just an epidemic of psychological distress, and there's many factors for that, not just what people may or may not be eating, but diet is something that can be modified. And so if we know that young people, and these two things are quite separate, and I think that's an important point, if they're not getting enough of the good stuff, so the stuff that's got the fibre and the phytonutrients and the vegetables, the fruits, the whole grains, the fish, all those sorts of things, and or they're having a lot of these unhealthful food products and ultra processed foods, they are at increased risk, and they have a more mental health symptoms, even when you take into account a whole host of factors. In fact, I did a study, worked with Barts and the London School of Medicine, and looked at data from East London and the Tower Hamlets, and very disadvantaged communities. And this is quite a while back now. And even when we took into account all of these really challenging social factors, we still saw that young people who had more vegetables in their diet tended to have better mental health outcomes. So if we're thinking about prevention, this is something that can actually be modified to improve outcomes.
So what you're saying really is there's a piece which is sort of almost like governmental impact to and almost like educational through. I mean, we don't have home ec and anything like that in the school system anymore. So I think people
and that's a real shame.
Haven't got a clue how to cook anything. I know I've got two youngish daughters. I know one of them now can probably cook herself, make herself beans on toast and an egg, and she can cook some pasta. But that probably is about the scope of it.
In Australia, teenagers are eating on average 7 serves of junk food a day. Now that's probably the same in the UK. Now, if you think from the point of view of the population, from the government, from policy, we know that globally, unhealthy diet, so poor diet and its results, so high blood glucose, high blood pressure, high body mass index, these are all in the top 5 leading causes of illness and early death across the globe, right? The global industrialised food system, and this includes, monocultures and herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, antibiotics in the food chain, global food systems, like the works. The UN Food Summit report a couple of years ago estimated, and this is a very conservative estimation, that the global industrialised food system costs the globe $20 trillion a year. 20 trillion. Now, that's just the bare minimum. I think that's probably much more, but there were many things that they couldn't calculate within that. 11 trillion of that cost relates to human health, 7 trillion to the environment, because the industrialised food system is the leading cause of loss of biodiversity. Now, these two things are closely linked. If you have loss of biodiversity in the environment because of what we're doing to our soil, what we're doing to, land clearing, etc., that is directly linking to the loss of the human biodiversity, which is our microbiome. And that is in turn very clearly linked to a whole host of problems, health problems, everything from allergic disease, autoimmune disease, mental health, etc., etc. So the fact that governments are not doing anything to change the food settings, the food system, the food environment, the food policies, and this is largely because, these industries are the largest in the world, and they are much more powerful and well-resourced than most nation-state governments.
And they've been driving a lot of the research in the past as well, I think, in sort of...
Well, to some degree, but I think that that's less clear-cut than many people on Instagram like to think. But the fact is that governments are ignoring this at their peril. They're ignoring the fact this is the leading cause of costs to them and their public health systems, and particularly countries like the UK and Australia, where you have, nominally anyway, universal health coverage. It's the fact that this is the elephant in the room that everyone's just ignoring is just does my head in. And then if you think about planetary climate change and everything else, the way we're farming, that industrialised food system, it's a major contributor, but it's also potentially a major solution.
Yeah.
If we look at regenerative farming and the new data that are coming out of many countries, but particularly Australia, regen farming and regen agriculture can be such an important solution to carbon and carbon capture. And yet it's just being ignored.
Yeah.
I've got a question that I thought would be really interesting, Felice. You talked a bit just about the mechanisms through which diet can impact our mental health. So you sort of touched on the gut microbiome, and that our microbes are sending, producing compounds that send messages to our brains. So is that what your research shows? That's the primary mechanism, or what else is going on? How are these foods impacting our mental health?
Look, it's a really great question. We did a very important review about this, published in Molecular Psychiatry a couple of years ago, and it's really important to say that the data are still lacking, because what we have is lots of evidence and data about how diet influences various factors that in turn we know influence mental health. But putting those three things together hasn't yet been done. But what we know is that diet plays a very important, has a very important impact on our immune function, on, we think, epigenetics, that's an emerging area of research, mitochondrial function, our neurotransmitter systems, our stress response system. All of these factors are affected by diet, and very importantly to the hippocampus, brain plasticity. This is a key region of the brain that's very closely involved in learning and memory, but it's also involved in mental health. It's also involved in appetite regulation, and it's the one area of the brain that's very plastic, grows and shrinks, and in regards to environmental exposures, diet seems to influence it quite profoundly. We see studies in young, healthy university students where just 4 days of having unhealthful breakfasts has an impact on cognition, cognitive tasks that are linked to the hippocampus, just 4 days. So brain plasticity, this is another way in which we think diet influences mental health. But what links them all is the gut microbiome, because the gut microbiome influences all those other factors. So 70% of your immune cells are in the gut. The gut microbes influence everything from your metabolism, obviously your immune function, epigenetics, stress response system, mitochondrial function, and brain plasticity. So when we eat food, the microbes, particularly the microbes in our gut where most of them live, their job is to break down components of food that our own human enzymes can't break down. And that's primarily things like plant fiber and many of those phytochemicals, like people know them as antioxidants, but things like polyphenols. Now, it's important to say that we now think that in plant foods, there may be as many as 150,000 different types of these phytochemicals, not all in the same plant, but, you know, across the spectrum. Many of these we think are being very profoundly reduced by industrial cropping. But we have evolved as humans to interact with those phytochemicals, and they interact with our systems. Many of these seem to interact closely with the microbiome, the gut microbiome. And then the gut microbiome, if it, and I say if, it gets the fibre and the polyphenols and things making their way through the short bowel, which is where things that are very easily broken down, like sugars and refined carbohydrates, but make their way to the large bowel, the gut, the microbes get to work and they break them down and they ferment them. And in the process, they release thousands of different molecules. And these molecules interact powerfully with all of these systems in the body that I mentioned before. And this is why we think the microbiome and the gut is a really key pathway by which diet influences mental and brain health.
One thing you mentioned, Felice, was that studies have shown that it's very quick that ultra-processed food or unhealthful foods, which I think is a great term, can impact. Is it as, I'm guessing it's not as quickly then to undo those processes, or is it? Because are there any, not top tips, but is it as simple as reversing those things reverses it, or actually now do you need to almost repopulate your gut microbiome because it may well be now affected or impacted?
It's a really good question that we don't really have the answer for. So we've got 2 studies that have shown that within 4 days or a week of higher intake of unhealthful foods, you get these cognitive effects that are linked to the hippocampus. This is in young, healthy people. So that suggests and we certainly see in animal studies that you can very quickly affect the brain and memory tasks and cognitive tasks related to the hippocampus by changing diet. In those 2 studies, once the young people stopped eating those unhealthful foods, when they were measured again 3 months later, they seem to have gone back to where they were before. So that was able to be undone. In the randomised controlled trials, there's been 4 so far that have looked at helping people to improve their diet in order to improve their depression, including very severe clinical depression. And in 2 of those studies, or maybe 3, they were over a period of, say, 3 months. But there was one study that was only 3 weeks, and they still saw really profound improvements within 3 weeks. Having said that, what we know from the animal studies is that after 4 generations of very low complex carbohydrate diets, which is complex carbohydrate is what the primary food for the gut microbiome, the diversity of the microbiome could not be reinstated. The only way they could get the diversity back into the rodents was through a poo transplant. But that's 4 generations. Now, in the US, you have several generations now that have been exposed to the SAD, the standard American diet, which is, it's mainly not food. It's frankenfood. But because that is so widespread and so embedded, most people don't even recognize that that is abnormal.
Yeah.
So it looks like there's a real chance that people who have been exposed over, maybe generations to very low healthful diets, very low fibre, etc., they may not be able to just put it back in and everything will be okay. There is some very emerging evidence that if people have fermented foods, so things like sauerkraut and kimchi and kombucha and kefir, that can really help to increase their microbial diversity. And I should say that while the evidence is not 100% clear, at this stage, there's pretty good evidence that the diversity of your microbiome is a very important marker of health. In cancer research, people who have a more diverse microbiome have much better outcomes in response to treatment, particularly immunotherapy. The diversity of your microbes is linked to frailty. So as you get older, cognitive decline and illnesses that go with aging, and a whole host of other health outcomes are linked to the diversity of the microbiome. And if you think about the microbiome in terms of, it's really like a rainforest. And a rainforest is highly diverse, many, many microbes and fungi and insects and animals and plants and everything all working very synergistically. That's a very robust system. It's really resistant then to pathogens and illnesses, whereas these monocultures, say a plantation, very, very susceptible to any single virus or pathogen coming through. So we think that the gut microbiome in humans is similar. And of course, to promote diversity of your microbiome, you need diversity of plant foods and diversity of foods in general. But, we're talking here about whole foods, not pretend foods.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier about legumes, and I guess so what we're talking really is high plant-based diet, things that, you have to cook, things you have to peel, things you have to, they're juicy. And so fruit, veg, nuts, seeds, legumes. What else is in the sort of
all the
recommendation?
Whole grains. And I might actually pass over to Tetiana here. So Tetiana has a background in dietetics. She's a dietitian researcher with us, as well as being our education lead and the head of the Food and Mood Academy. And she can probably talk to some of this in more detail.
Perfect. Welcome, Tetiana. Sorry it took so long to get.
Thanks, Felice. Thank you. I'm just making sure that everyone can hear me, and always enjoy listening to Felice. I always learn something new and just making little notes here, but then drawings. 7 a.m. here. So quite a few important points, Felice, you already highlighted for us. But I think going back to diversity of plants, and Felice mentioned before about fibers and polyphenols or phytochemicals, which are really, really beneficial for plants' defense system. So all these phytochemicals plants produce to fight various insects and environmental factors. But we increasingly understand that these phytochemicals are also quite beneficial for humans. They kind of do the very similar perform very similar functions. So before we call them antioxidants, now we understand that there's so many of them and so many different functions. And variety of plant foods bring us the variety of these phytochemicals, along with variety of fibers. And when you think about your gut microbiota, this amazing universe within us, we need the variety of different plants. And Alex, you mentioned legumes. Love the way you produce legumes, legumes, beans, nuts, seeds, herbs and spices, whole grains. Look, whole grains are carbohydrates, and carbohydrates being given a very bad name in the last few years, which is so unfortunate, because whole grains and complex carbohydrates are beautiful part of diet. They're so diverse, they cheap and cheerful, they're full of fiber, they're full of vitamins, they're full of phytochemicals as well. So this is what we kind of need to pay attention in our diet, variety of various plant foods. And Felice mentioned about the links between diet and mental health, but putting that into numbers, we have studies, Alex and Laura and everybody else, showing that eating well decreases your risk for developing depression by about 30%. So there's various types of diet being studied. Mediterranean probably one of the more kind of famous one and easier to characterize, but it doesn't have to be Mediterranean. Any type of eating which includes that variety of plant foods, so whole grains, legumes and beans, vegetable, fruit, nuts, seeds, herbs, and discourages consumption as much as possible of those ultra processed foods, which quite often have a lot of added sugar, a lot of added salt and fats, which we don't really need in our body. So this type of eating does reduce your chances for developing depression. What we know right now in the world, it's unfortunately increased incidence of depression, increased prevalence of depression. So I always say, by any means we can decrease our risks, it's a good means by me. And diet is one of the important factors. Coming from Food and Mood Center, we need to remember this, of course, and we're going to be all pro diet, but all other lifestyle factors, exercise, sleeping well, reducing your stress, being in the nature. And Felice mentioned and changes in gut microbiota and how quickly this can occur. We need to remember, although we can impact our gut microbiota and produce some favorable changes, consistency is a key. We need to look at that complexly and consistently. So it's nothing of this, yo-yo kind of winning day and back and eating well and then cheating. I really don't like this approach. So sustainable, long-term approach. Doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be kind of complex and from every possible angle, including diet.
And I think if we reduce or just discard this focus on body size, let's stop talking about obesity. In regards to mental health, it just doesn't seem to even factor in the equation. If we stop thinking about food and restriction of food like some sort of punishment, and instead think about it as this beautiful, nourishing, wonderful aspect of our lives where we can just focus on nurturing all of our systems, nurturing our brain, nurturing our body, making food, eating it with family and friends, enjoying food and not being focused the whole time on the size of your stomach. That makes food a very different conversation, a very different approach to food that we know is the most effective way to improve your mental health in regards to food. And it's just so much more pleasurable, and it makes you so much happier when you think about food in terms of a wonderful reward, and not a reward like a donut reward, but in that really intrinsic nurturing. I mean, those factors, what you eat, how much you move, your sleep, whether or not you smoke, drink, a lot of alcohol, they're foundational to health. And across the world, there's only one set of clinical guidelines that have now reflected their importance in psychiatry, and that's in Australia. So the Royal Australian New Zealand College of Psychiatry, first time anywhere in the world, have put those factors as the foundation of treatment for mood disorders. They say that they're essentially non-negotiable, that they should be addressed first before you go on and build other treatments on top. It's not an either or thing. It doesn't mean don't have other forms of treatment. I think that's an important point, but it's like you need to get that right for everything else to be working and for people to have the greatest chance of recovery. The issue is that around the world, and we know this from global surveys, that doctors, psychiatrists, medical professionals get almost zero nutrition training during their training. And yet there are many cases very often making recommendations about supplements or particular dietary strategies that don't necessarily have an evidence base. And that's why we set up the Food and Mood Academy. And this is the irony in research, is that you can sometimes, if you're lucky, get funding for research, but there's no funding through those systems for translating that research into action. And we know there's an average 17-year gap between when research is done and those findings make their way into policy and practice. Now, we want to short circuit that. The Food and Mood Academy has been funded by philanthropy. We cannot get funding through other ways. We don't get anything out of this. We don't get, they're not part of our key performance indicators or something like that. We set up the Academy because it was so important that people know this in the general public and that clinicians can have the evidence and then know how to actually implement it in their practice. And Tetiana has worked tirelessly for the last few years and worked closely with the Royal Australian New Zealand College. The first course that she led, a free course, has already enrolled, I think, more than 86,000 students from more than 180 countries around the world. Wow. But we now have this accredited training for psychiatrists, for other medical professionals. And I think there's a new course that's just started this week. Is that right, Tetiana?
Yep, it started, this week. It's on lifestyle medicine, and that's our joint collaborative work with James Cook University in Australia. And Felice, I'm glad that you mentioned in evidence-based, because it is important. There's so much of dietary and other lifestyle recommendations out there which are not necessarily based on evidence. And that's our absolute and main feature. Everything we do in Academy and everything we talk about today, everything we recommend in our consultancy work with companies and organizations is, of course, based on evidence. So how we talk about today food and eating food, consuming various types of food, and consuming various dietary patterns, we know that Mediterranean style diet is the evidence-based diet. That's what's been showing to not just prevent developing depression, but also treat depressive symptoms. And of course, our center was first in the world to conduct a randomized controlled trial. We call that the SMILES trial, which actually showed that changing your diet, improving the quality of your diet, not by, buying something out of your reach or spending a lot of money, but just changing your diet to eat more plant food, to eat more whole grains and vegetables and legumes and nuts and seeds, can actually improve your depressive outcomes as well. So we ran the SMILES trial for 3 months, and we had dietary group, and we also had group which went through befriending protocol. We call that befriending protocol, basically social interaction, because we know it's quite important, of course, for our mental health. People in the dietary group were recommended to change their diet to include about 6 serves of veggies every day, 3 serves of fruit, lots of whole grains, 5 to 8 serves, and it's very much depend on your needs. And also include things like legumes and olive oil and red meat, but not in the usual way Australians eat red meat. So it's more modest consumption of red
Small
meat.
amounts.
Yes. Fish and all other wonderful components of diet which support our mental health and reduce all those extra, which extra food we call them, or discretionary foods, foods which are often ultra processed with a lot of added sugar, salt, and fat. And what that study showed, that 3 months was enough to significantly improve depressive outcome in people who actually improved their diet. We saw that dose response relationship. So the more you change your diet for the better, the more you see it's impacting your mental health for the better. And by the end of 3 months, we saw 1/3 of dietary group went into remission, meaning they no longer had clinical depression. And that's why people who, were referred to us, to Felice led the study, by their practitioners, people who lived with depression for quite a few years. So that was world first. That was very exciting because it's provided essentially another avenue to support your mental health, to treat your symptoms. Because for people who live with mental health disorders, severe depression, or other serious mental illness, quite often so many decisions feel like they've been taken away from them by disorder, by treatment requirements. So knowing that you can actually do something for yourself, you can nourish your body through food and help yourself, help your symptoms, is very empowering message. And we see that consumers and people, we call everyone consumer, that's just a health term, but people all over the world understand that, and that's been showing in tremendous success of our course, but also everything else we offer, all the educational opportunities. And Felice mentioned that it's started being reflected in guidelines, and we know Royal Australian and New Zealand College of Psychiatry endorses diet and other lifestyle factors. But look, it's going to happen all over the world. It's coming because it's a natural progression. We need new treatment options for mental health disorders. In the last 30, 40 years, we really did not advance our pharmacological treatments by much. It's the same kind of active ingredients being used in different medications, whereas food provides something which we all can do, we all can impact for ourselves and our families as well.
And it's
And
important to just note with the SMILES trial that most people in the trial were on other forms of treatment. They were on antidepressants, psychotherapy. So it's never an either or question. And we never would advocate that, you just eat veggies and that'll cure your depression and you don't need to do anything else. Now, for some people, it may be that making really large changes to their lifestyle behaviours is sufficient. But for others, it's part of an integrated approach where you have medication, therapy, whatever else is helpful for the individual. I think that's a really important point to make.
And I really like I think so much of dietary guidelines, as a dietitian myself, Tatiana, you probably agree that probably the only people that understand it are the dietitians themselves, because it's all in, like, who knows what 30 grams of fiber actually looks like, or the 6 grams of salt. But what I love about the research that you've done and the information that you share is that it's in really tangible amounts, so amounts of servings per day for people to aim for, which I just think is so much easier for somebody to understand. And it sounds like, because obviously what you're describing, 6 serves of veg and 3 fruit, is quite a long way from, I think in the UK, the average portions are, it's less than 4. So there's quite a long way to go. But it sounds that because there is this dose response relationship, actually even working towards that target is going to be beneficial.
People feel very overwhelmed by this idea that they somehow need to get 30 different types of plant foods into them every week. But Tatiana, you can probably give some really good concrete examples of meals, and certainly the Food and Mood Academy and the Food and Mood Centre website have lots of easy resources on there. But Tatiana, do you want to give some examples of brekkie, lunch, dinner?
Oh, definitely. And Felice, we do know where the 30 plants coming from, or 30 different plants coming from. I just want to give a bit of context here. So it's not about eating 30 serves per week. You do actually need a bit more. We would like you to eat a bit more. It's about that variety. Remember how we talked the variety of various plants? It's what's needed to deliver variety of fiber and various phytochemicals as well. And look, sometimes it might be very challenging for some people to understand how to do so, because as we talked before, we really lacking currently skills and knowledge around diet, around nutrition, around how to cook for yourself. So there are a range of ready meals, wink wink, without saying too much here, but there are some ready-made meals which are better than others because they do include lots of various plants and vegetables, kind of whole grains. Or if you're trying to prepare something at home, just add in the variety or pre-cut, say, salads, which have lots of various vegetables, or mix nuts or mix fruit to your kind of food. That's what's gonna make difference. So again, don't worry too much if it's all kind of too overwhelming. There's a lot of things you can do right now. There's various ranges of ready-made meals. There's a lot of snacks available to you, to all of us right now at the shops. Sometimes we think we're so busy, we don't have time to look around, but I always encourage people just to spend few minutes to have a look what around, not just in your usual shop or usual corner of the shop where you come in and grab your snacks or food. Look around what else is available. There's a lot of variety to be have and to be added to your diet quite easily through using various types of whole grains, various types of vegetables already pre-cut in salads, mixed nuts, mixed fruit. So that's kind of the way we can do it, the way we can increase our variety and target and reach and exceed those 30 different plants a week.
Yeah.
And I will just jump on your ready meal mention, but one of the things we've been working with the team on here is on a food and mood plan, and an amazing detail that Tetiana's got into, and putting together a plan that has over 40 types of veg, over 35 different types of whole grains, but encompassed within some of our meals, but then also added in extra things that can deliver against all of these metrics. And it's super exciting to see the variety you can get through various things.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, if you just use as an example, like breakfast, I'm about to go and have what I would have a lot of mornings is a bit of yogurt with some raw oats on top and some frozen blueberries out of the fridge. And then I put some pecans in the microwave for 1 minute and spread them around. And then you've got these lovely roasted pecans that I put on top. That was your tip, Tetiana. Or, I get the veggies that cook quickly. So the water-based veggies like zucchini and tomato and capsicum and things like that. As I'm getting ready, I've just got them on a slow simmer on the stove with a bit of water and a bit of extra virgin olive oil. And then as they're softening, I just add in an egg and maybe, if I've got a few herbs growing in a pot, chuck those on. Those sorts of breakfasts are pretty easy. So that's the sort of thing where you start to really get your plant intake up quite easily. Or if you're going to have a sandwich for lunch, make it a salad roll and see how many different types of salad you can get in there. You can still have your cheese or whatever, but just, and dinner, if you're going to do spag bowl, add in a tin of lentils, add in some frozen veggies. You can vitamize them if you like, just get that extra in there if you can.
Absolutely. Or if you choose to eat ready-made meal, and again, look, people sometimes feel almost guilty of buying ready-made meals or, eating ready-made meals because they think that they have to cook at home. Look, cooking at home is fantastic, but let's be realistic. Not everyone can cook at home. Not everyone have means, times, resources, or knowledge. People might need to learn and kind of build themselves up to this. So if you are choosing ready-made meals, do take time to read what actually in them. Sometimes we might have some in frozen section of supermarket, it might say plant-based, but when you read through, look, it is plant-based, but there might be 2 or 3 plants there and that's it, which is not the worst case scenario, but it still might not give you that variety we want. So if you are choosing to get something on the go, please do look through what you actually eating. And another thing which I think amazes more people than I thought possible, that just because food isn't salty or sweet, it does not mean that it doesn't have a lot of added salt or sugar, because salt and sugar are natural preservatives. So to make the food more kind of palatable, but also for food to keep longer, which a lot of kind of industrialized food is, you know, when it's just on the shelf, doesn't need to be refrigerated or frozen just to keep. That type of food would have a lot of sugar, salt, and other preservatives to kind of keep it fresh. So do read the small print. That's a good kind of health technique to have.
Brilliant. Well, ladies, I wondered if there were maybe just a couple of top tips that you might leave people with. I know, Felice, you've given us an amazing breakfast for people to try. So I don't have any pecans in my house, so maybe tomorrow that's something I'll go out.
I love
Doesn't have
pecans.
to
They're
be
just
pecans,
amazing.
anything, Alex.
Yeah, it could be like there are just, you know, cashews, Brazil nuts, walnuts, almonds, you know, they're all fabulous. And I think nuts are completely underrated. They are the most amazing little bombs of nutrition. And they're also really good for satiety. So if you have them in an afternoon snack, it really does fill you up, and it has all these other benefits as well. So that'd be my tip is probably nuts, but also get yourself a slow cooker. You can get them from the op shop for almost nothing. I mean, you can get them at Kmart for, you know, nothing. And you can just, all your veggies that are sort of looking a bit sad in the bottom of the fridge, and legumes and some, you know, pearl barley, for example, which is just delicious. You know, and it's like tomato and whatever spices and things you want to put in, and you just chuck that in the slow cooker, and then you've got sort of a stew that can be vitamized to turn into a pasta sauce, or it can be add liquid to it to make it a soup, or it can be a stew, whatever you like, but it's very cheap, easy to prepare. So that's a sort of a tip that, you know, I use a lot myself.
And I think you're absolutely right what you said right at the beginning. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to break the bank. Actually, there's so many things out there that are super simple and super easy. And I always go back to this idea that, you know, diet is a pillar. Diet in this country, certainly in England, probably around the world, has been turned into this negative connected word that seems it's about what you take out and what you don't have. Where actually diet is all derived from way of life, and it's about habituality and doing it, and actually the act of eating. It used to be such a social thing, and it's become the opposite of that. And you know, sort of people feel bad to eat, and I think, you know, making food fun and enjoyable and social as well, sort of really, lots of positive things can come from that.
That's a good point, Alex. And just in general, take it easy. You know, people always feel that they have to do something amazing right now. It's have to be black and white. It's have to be perfect. And look, do not set yourself for failure. You know, take it easy. Think about what can you do. Can you have a fresh fruit this afternoon? Fantastic. You know, can you grab a meal? Could be ready-made meal, which does have a bit more in it, a bit more variety, a bit less, you know, added sugar, salt, and all other nasty stuff. Get yourself olive oil. Sometimes people take time to kind of adjust to olive oil, which again might be news for some of us who literally swim in olive oil every day, like Felice and myself do. But so some people find that it's a little bit bitter or a little bit strong tasting. And guess what? It's those polyphenols, those fantastic phytochemicals you can taste. So
if it's the extra virgin stuff, there's a lot of rubbish olive oils on the shelf. You really want the ones that are like dark green and you know it's extra virgin. I think about extra virgin olive oil like medicine. Like, it is just such a powerful, I think, health thing, food, whatever you want to call it. I think it goes beyond food.
Some people do take time to adjust. So extra virgin olive oil might not be for you straight away. You might go with a light oil. So it's been a bit refined, and, you know, Felice might say, oh no, not refined oil. But if you're gonna to adjust to your extra virgin olive oil for the rest of your life, you need to eat, you know, go through 1 bottle of refined oil. I think it's a case step to do, you know.
I put
so
that
think
on
about,
toast with a little tiny bit of salt, but olive oil on toast is just amazing. And if you can get used to that, then you just put it on everything.
Well,
Absolutely,
we're
or on anything else.
yeah, we're extra virgin olive oil all the way. Every meal we cook is only extra virgin olive oil. It's one of
That's
the
so
core
good
things.
to hear.
But adding on some extra, Alex, and I think that's been one of the recommendations in the new range you're going to be offering, to have extra virgin olive oil on top. So you got your meal, you defrost it, you're ready to eat it, drizzle some extra virgin olive oil on top. Because, you know, freezing, defrosting, it can kind of impact not so much quality of oil or food you eat, but it's just about palatability and how it's actually going to look on a plate. Because a lot of defrosted extra virgin olive oil doesn't look as nice as it's my son. So get yourself some extra, drizzle on your food. Anything, you know, anything like Felice mentioned, you know, a bit of toast, a bit of nuts. Some people do drizzle a little bit of olive oil on their nuts before they put them into microwave or roast them, again, to increase the flavor. So everyone is different, but try something new. Think about what you can do for yourself. Doesn't have to be black and white. Definitely no restrictive diet. Enjoy, add on stuff instead of taking stuff away from yourself. So make it easy. Life is long, hopefully. Sometimes it's challenging. So as you know, whatever we can do to support ourselves, I think that's how we need to look at all that health stuff.
Brilliant. Felice, Tatiana, thank you so much. If
Thank you.
people on here don't follow Felice or the Food and Mood Academy and the Food and Mood Centre, we'll put up their handles later. And we've got lots more information that from Tatiana, particularly on our website, coming live in the next couple of days. So thank you both so much. Have a lovely day.
Great to see you. I'll see you later on in the year in London, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
And we can discuss our applications for grant funding. If we get that, then we'll be partnering with you in research, which would be really great.
That would be fantastic and exciting. But thanks for mentioning the Academy, Alex. So we do have few Instagram accounts there. So Food and Mood Center is more about research. Food and Mood Academy is about how to actually read research and understand that. And mostly we translate the research into practical tips. So if you want to know more about, you know, eating without being particularly concerned or increasing your health anxiety, come and join Food and Mood Academy. Website, Instagram, Facebook, we're everywhere basically, so it's hard to miss us. Thank you so much for having us. So much fun.
Have a good day.
You too. See ya.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.